My next guest is Dr. Clay Cook. He is the Chief Development Officer at CharacterStrong and is an implementation scientist, psychologist, and former paraprofessional and middle school math teacher. He spent the past 15 years working in partnership with school systems across the country to support the implementation of effective practices that better promote the more equitable outcomes for students. He has been a professor and researcher at three universities, Louisiana State University, University of Washington, and University of Minnesota, studying topics such as implementation of evidence-based practices, educator well-being and resilience, social emotional learning, and youth mental health. He has obtained over $20 million in grant funding for his research and published over 100 peer-reviewed scientific articles. For his work, he has been invited to the White House and served on expert panels with the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the U.S. Department of Education. Welcome to the podcast, Clay.
Well, I'm glad to be here. It's kind of weird to always hear someone introduce you, but I
Yeah.
appreciate the introduction.
Well, I've been using CharacterStrong in various schools I've worked at, and we're going to highlight a little bit about how people can use CharacterStrong in the middle school and high school today. But I wanted to start with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, my own experience as a student was one of the first trenches I had to
Mhm.
crawl out. And then professionally, obviously, we have, I think the job of education is knowing when you're in the trenches how to crawl out because doing the most meaningful work
Mhm.
uh, comes with adversity and
Mhm.
challenges that require being resilient in the face of kind of the challenges and adversity. But, going back to alternative high school, I was in alternative education for a stint. Um,
Mhm.
my own upbringing led me to making poor choices. Comprehensive campus didn't want me on the comprehensive campus, so I was in alternative ed, and I was lucky enough to have a teacher name. His name was Mr. Gogo. Mr. Gogo didn't teach me anything. I learned absolutely nothing, but he
Mhm.
cared so deeply about me as a person, and through that relationship, kind of knocked some sense into me enough
Mhm.
to allow me to go to community college and then that, a variety of different relationships kept me and created opportunities. I
Mhm.
like to think in many ways without those relationships I would be dead because
Mhm.
of some of the stupid choices I was making as a young person, and I didn't yet have a fully developed brain, and so really depended on relationships. So that was like a story of like being in the trenches and being able to get out and crawl out of that was really that relationship in alternative ed, and it did serve as a catalyst to get my life on track.
So, tell me about like how you moved into working with Character Strong after being professor and how some of your experience working with educator well-being and resilience and youth mental health helps you in your role at Character Strong.
Yeah, I was a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I was consulting with a school district
Mhm.
to implement a multi-tiered system of support framework to integrate kind of social character, well-being promoting practices across kind of tiers of support. I would
Mhm.
go into the high school there, and it was the most well-functioning high school I'd ever been in. And I mean, I have been worked across every state, been in thousands of schools. This was the most effective high school. It was like student powered. The
Mhm.
students
Mhm.
really took ownership. They were there to greet people as they came into the door. There was positive affect. There was supportive, positive interactions among peers and with staff. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And
Mhm.
as a researcher, you get really curious because if you look at the science in middle school and high schools, it's way skimpier than the scientific research we have at the elementary level.
Yeah.
I figured out what was the reason why that high school. It was a leadership teacher
Mhm.
created a leadership class and cycled every student on the campus through the leadership class, and it was like a tier 1 prevention program
Mhm.
that emphasized character, how to be good stewards of their own school culture and climate, and learn skills.
Mhm.
Skills around enabling better relationships, skills to better manage emotions in the context of stressors that come up. And so I got befriended this leadership teacher. His name's John Norland,
Hmm.
and eventually he became the whole child coordinator for the district. And then it was like, hey, you're onto something here. We need to replicate this and we need to scale this because there's a need in our secondary settings. Character Strong started out in the secondary setting. We've
Okay.
now apply. We have pre-K through 12. And we not only have tier one programs, but we have tier two and tier three supports. But that's how I got involved into Character Strong and supported Character Strong doing research over
Hmm.
the years. Why I went from the University of Washington to the University of Minnesota and then decided to leave academia to
Hmm.
really scale the reach of evidence-based practices and make it more accessible in more schools and provide educators with the tools to meet students' needs. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the character strong part of that. And there's a whole story behind kind of the educator resilience side.
Well, tell me a little bit about that piece, because definitely implementing a program like this um, at the secondary level does go a long way for the school culture. And when students are taking pride in their school and their behaviors are um, polite, welcoming to visitors, et cetera, then the teachers thrive, right? And the relationships are well built. So talk a little bit about how that piece tied in with the resilience and educator well-being.
I as a researcher, I got introduced to the discipline of implementation science.
Hmm.
It just made too much sense to me because it's in
Hmm.
healthcare. The same issues we encounter in education are the same issues that healthcare or child welfare or
Hmm.
public health are. Is that we have all these effective solutions, but they're built on the well-being and engagement of the implementers. And if we're
Hmm.
not nurturing and supporting the implementers, then students or the recipients of care, a patient in a hospital, is going to be the recipient of either lackluster care if we're not really nurturing and supporting. And then you look at how are the adults in our schools doing, and many
Hmm.
are reporting they don't feel valued and appreciated. They feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They feel outmatched by the needs that students are bringing to the educational table. And all of a sudden you realize through an implement, we're not getting the adult piece right. And we
Hmm.
got to support and nurture our adults to get to the outcomes for young people. And
Hmm.
we have to be intentional and deliberate about how we're promoting and supporting educational resilience. And if you just think about being an educator, it's inherently met with challenges and adversity and stressors because you're doing such meaningful work. We're
Yeah.
shaping our future society. So inherent in that, it's going to be challenging, difficult work. And so then it's like, oh, then instead of labeling the problem, let's start to solve the problem. And that led to some work to develop programming specifically about supporting educators to promote their resilience and supporting them to implement high quality effective practices. And if
Hmm.
you although we always want to be student centered, in order to get to those student outcomes, we actually have to put the spotlight on the educators because the educators are the causes and the students are the effects in the sense that the educators are the ones that are the engine that's going to drive everything, even practices like student voice and choice.
Hmm.
Educators still have to create those opportunities and facilitate it. And so we have to get this adult piece right. And
Hmm.
support educators to be resilient and engage and retain them in the workforce. And now we can create more consistent conditions for implementation. And that's ultimately what students receive and access.
Hmm. Hmm. So tell me a little bit about how somebody, let's say district or a school leader who wants to use Character Strong, who may have experience using it from another district or from an elementary school, how can they implement it at a high school or middle school? What's also the principal's responsibility during that implementation process? And tie that in a little bit to the adult behavior and the retention piece as well.
Yeah, so at the secondary level, one thing I like to think about is many districts have like aspirations of the type
Yeah.
of who they want to be a part of producing and sending off into post-secondary education life. A lot of
Yeah.
school systems call it portrait of the graduate.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of those competencies, problem solving, interpersonal skills, collaboration,
Yeah.
emotional resilience or intelligence, those types of things are non-academic.
Yeah.
The question is, how are we going to actually promote those competencies and mindsets? And we actually have to teach it. So at
Hmm.
CharacterStrong, we design low burden, high impact curriculum that provides educators with the tools and resources to teach to those competencies that are aligned with the strategic goals and the portrait of the learner who a school system wants to create. Now
Hmm.
we have to work at the secondary level because we have so much in the way of competing demands for time and energy. We have to look at the master schedule. We
Yeah.
got to protect time for this. And then we got to support the adults to implement it
Hmm.
and teach the lessons, but help students apply the knowledge and skills they learn through those lessons to get in reps and build fluency with social and communication skills so they work better in teams or collaborate better with peers on an academic project, or they're more emotionally resilient in the face of academic stressors or stressors in life so they can
Hmm.
stay plugged in versus disengage. And so then we part of what we do is equip secondary schools with the curriculum. We also
Hmm.
have what we call core practices that
Hmm.
allow educators to infuse the support into any classroom environment. And we have what's called the serve model.
Okay.
S starts with start with a warm welcome and an intentional start. The signature practice is four at the door plus one more. It's
Hmm.
a concrete practice that involves educators doing positive greetings, having a high interest entry task waiting for students as they transition into the environment. So we have relational connection points to build relationships and belonging with students, as well as academic engagement strategies. And that's just one of the practices. So
Hmm.
what we do at Character Strong is design these practices that can be infused in any learning environment and then equip educators with the curriculum to teach to competencies that everybody agrees are important to position kids to be college, career, life ready and
Hmm.
transition into
Hmm.
that well. And then we support the leaders to be able to support their adults to implement. And so we
Hmm.
really work through leadership teams to create the conditions for successful implementation through helping leaders understand that you have to go beyond what we call train and hope. It's
Hmm.
not about training one time and giving people the curriculum or giving them a resource on the practices. You actually have to support and nurture behavior change among the educators.
Yeah.
And one of the things that might interfere with the educator's ability to participate in a behavior change process as they're adopting new practices and implementing them is they might not be well, or they
Hmm.
might be overwhelmed, or they might feel stuck and not feel like a valued and appreciated member of the school. Those things will prevent the educator from, you know, engaging with training,
Yeah.
and, or if there is coaching supports available for people to help them get better and modeling and mentoring opportunities for staff that we've created, or we've monitored fidelity and we're giving feedback. Hey, here's what we're implementing well, and here's how we can get better. If people aren't in a good place, they don't respond to those supports well, just like a student who's not in a good place doesn't respond to the instruction if we
Hmm.
don't have really positive culture and climate. So that resiliency piece is there, but we also need the behavior change pieces like training, coaching,
Hmm.
protected time
Hmm.
for collaboration, reflection, and planning, monitoring fidelity and giving feedback, and creating cueing systems that prompt and remind people of how to implement whatever thing they're trying to implement well in the case of curriculum or those practices. And so that's what leaders do. Principals
Hmm.
work through a team to put a spotlight on the adults and say, what do the adults need from us in
Yeah.
order to support them to implement? And is there anything that's interfere with their ability to um, be receptive to those implementation supports because they're not in a good place? And we got to help
Hmm.
them get in a good place so they want to adopt and continuously improve their practice.
Hmm. Hmm. So, do you have an example of maybe a time frame for implementation in terms of would there be a like an exploration phase, like a trial or a partial implementation? How does that usually work if you're, for example, implementing Character Strong at the high school?
Yeah, we typically split into two phases.
Okay.
Pre-implementation,
Yeah.
which the main outcome is readiness.
Yeah.
Are our people, and we operationalize readiness as confident and committed to do
Okay.
the thing. So we got to help people develop shared clarity on what the thing we're asking them to implement, why we're doing it, and
Hmm.
how they can fit it in given other competing demands for their time. And that's the confidence part. Because a lot of people can understand why and what, but at the end of the day, they're like, how? I don't have time to
Yeah.
actually put it in and do it. That will stall implementation. So we work on readiness, and then we have what's called active implementation, and that's supporting people to do the thing, but not only start to do the thing, get better at doing the thing over time, and
Hmm.
hopefully work towards making sure that thing sticks
Yeah.
so it can produce prolonged benefit. And that's where training, creating structures for social support like mentoring and modeling, protecting time and PLCs or grade level or department meetings to come back with a structured protocol to
Hmm.
reflect on implementation and have time to think more deeply on how can I improve the delivery of this thing so we can increase the yield of it on in terms of student outcomes. Giving people feedback, but non-evaluative feedback to say, hey, here's what you're doing well, and here's the opportunities we can even get better and go
Hmm.
farther with the potential for student outcomes if we make these improvements. And then those
Hmm.
cueing systems and reminders become really important to keep it alive and well and on the top of people's minds because educators have lots of things they're juggling and they
Yeah.
can benefit from reminders and things that keep things in focus because there's so much cognitive task shifting and cognitive load that we
Hmm.
have to help educators remember about the implementation and what it looks like to do it
Yeah.
well. And so that's what we typically do in the active implementation, but we help leaders understand there's pre-implementation stuff you need to do, promote
Hmm.
readiness, and then there's active implementation things you need to do to support people to get to high fidelity. And high fidelity is just we're doing it in a way where we increase the probability of student outcomes coming about as a result of our work.
Hmm. Hmm. How long would that active implementation phase really be?
So this, it depends. I like to think it's like a construction project.
Okay.
Imagine you only had someone building a house or
Hmm.
doing your remodel, and they only can come on Sunday afternoon. And
Hmm.
it's going to take a long time because of what the input is into the
Sure.
build. Now, the
Hmm.
more you can invest in something, imagine you instead had people coming 7 days a week for 9 to 10 hours a day. That build will go quicker. Implementation is the same, but we're bounded by time. How much can we actually pour into this
Yeah.
implementation effort
Hmm.
relative to other stuff? But typically, to get to high fidelity is not even a year process. It can be up to a 2 to 3 year process based on how much we can invest training, how much we can protect time for people to come back and reflect on it. How many times can we create kind of feedback cycles for
Sure.
improvement? But it usually can be up to a 2 to 3 year process. Now, I've seen schools achieve high fidelity implementation in a much more rapid pace because they were able to pour more into that and they prioritize this as the main implementation effort. But a
Hmm.
lot of schools have multiple implementation
Yeah.
efforts going on at once, and there's only so much human capacity to
Yeah.
take and continuously improve in all those things. But if you focus and really prioritize one thing and pour it into it, you can get people to fidelity quicker. And so it
Mhm.
really depends on how much one can prioritize and invest in an implementation effort. And that's where we typically customize the implementation support based on
Okay.
kind of the constraints that school's working within.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It sounds a little bit like, everybody has like their own like capacity and yeah, they need to really be able to see what they can achieve or, how much they can take on within that time frame. So I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the resources that educators can access on the Character Strong website. So first of all, you have a podcast. So you have a weekly chats with different educators. Tell me a little bit about maybe a recent guest that you had on, and what people can hear about some of the conversations in that podcast.
Yeah, we bring in people who from different roles in the
Hmm.
educational ecosystem that are doing some really cool work. And it could be on leadership and supporting educators' well-being. We've had a whole series on kind of adult well-being where we
Hmm.
bring people in to talk about what they're doing and the kind of positive outcomes they're speaking to. We've had podcasts on topics like chronic absenteeism because it's
Hmm.
been an issue, but really thinking a way of like helping people learn about some strategies that people are doing in their school systems and experiencing success with those strategies. I recently did one on the topic of sustainability and
Okay.
why it's so critical to get a return on our investment when we're investing in implementation efforts. Because ultimately, when we start something from the outset, we should be planning for how are we going to get to sustainability, especially if it's a good thing that can produce benefit. But that gives you an idea. It's a range of topics, a range of different voice leaders, teachers, counselors,
Hmm.
consultants who are working with multiple school systems. And it's just really an opportunity to learn how can we refine our practices and how can we learn from others who are doing really good work that you can kind of beg, borrow, and steal and replicate in your own work.
Hmm. Hmm. As well, there is a blog on the website. So I would assume a lot of these same topics are covered on the blog. Um, are there also things that are more, I would say, based on the level of schools, certain blogs that could apply to high schools only, for example?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's certain blogs that are written for particular audiences, so it
Hmm.
has a better fit for that context. And as you know, I think behind the question and the statement is high schools are unique contexts.
Hmm.
And we
Hmm.
have adults who are working in those contexts that come with kind of a different mindset. Obviously, the students being served are a particular developmental age, and the transition is into life,
Hmm.
post-secondary education
Hmm.
life. So the outcomes are different too. And so things that really fit that context are what is needed. People who kind of get it and understand the high school context and what it takes to kind of weave in the work is what we try to do and segment some of those things so people feel like that whatever it's whether it's a blog, it's a podcast or anything else kind of speaks to them and really fits their day-to-day realities and it feels relevant.
Hmm. Hmm. As well, for people who may have been using Character Strong for a while and want to get more training, what are some of the opportunities that they can access?
Yeah, we take a big pride. Most of us come from the work,
Hmm.
people teaching experiences, and so our professional learning to make sure it's super high quality. We take a big pride in that, and we're also humble to continuously improve it because we know it has to get better. Because if we're going
Hmm.
to take people's time in a professional learning experience, it better be stinking good because
Hmm.
time is so precious. And so we have a variety that are what we call product specific, like our tier one. We have trainings on our tier one solution, how to actually adopt and implement that well. We have a two solution that helps educators bring to life early intervention for kids with mild to moderate needs who need more in addition to tier one. And then we also have a tier three solution. So we have professional learning tied to that. We
Okay.
also have what we call product agnostic certification trainings.
Okay.
We have like MTSS certification training. It's a 2-day event, and it's really about building knowledge, equipping people with tools to drive forward MTSS. And it has nothing to do with our products. It's whatever priority um, practices and programs that a school has identified. How do you go and support implementation within a continuum of care? And
Hmm.
then gather the data you need to make strategic decisions. Like, how do we identify kids proactively who need additional supports? And then, how do we, for those students, look at the root cause and match the student to a precise support that tailors the root cause, is tailored to their root cause. And we help people build the capacity to drive forward MTSS. We have a
Hmm.
tier two cert, a tier three cert, And we also have annually what we call the NatCon, the National Conference, and it's in Tacoma, Washington. But we get about 1,000 educators who come out, and it's a conference, a 2-day conference with keynotes, breakout sessions, and it's really an immersive experience where people walk away feeling appreciated for their role,
Hmm.
feeling inspired, and then walk away with practical tools and resources they can apply back to their work once they get going the next academic year. And so that national conference is a pretty cool event. We always have a cool theme, and we do a variety of things to recognize and appreciate educators for what they do.
So people can find out more about those trainings on the website, as well as you also have a curriculum for adults on educator resilience. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called the Adult Resilience Curriculum, and it's designed to be used with educators to put a spotlight on how can we promote our own resilience, and it outlines a framework of different kind of well-being promoting
Hmm.
practices and allows people to develop their own personalized plans. How are we going to kind of take care of ourselves and others in this work that's
Hmm.
inherently stressful but so meaningful and aligned with people's values for why what makes life important. But yeah, nonetheless, we gotta be intentional and deliberate. So it gives people resources on a variety of well-being promoting practices, whether it's focused on things like sleep.
Hmm.
If someone doesn't want to work on sleep, they don't have to. There's
Hmm.
other emotion regulation. There's also how do we connect with others in really meaningful ways, and who are we going to go to for social support and mentoring in our school so everybody is socially connected in a building, but being intentional versus sometimes people are waiting for those things to fall in their laps and they're not falling on their lap. So what if
Hmm.
we took an intentional approach? So it's called Achiever, and in
Okay.
for each of the letters stands for a well-being promoting practice. And that's a free resource that we developed. I've actually done randomized control trials on it as a professor, showing what happens if implemented with like elementary or secondary educators.
Hmm.
People's well-being goes up, their stress goes down, and their implementation of student-facing practices improves.
Okay.
So it's like this, it makes sense. Like as people feel better and they perform better in their roles. And that's
Hmm.
like as a kid feels better in the context, they're probably going to perform better. And if you
Hmm.
have an unmet need, it will show up in behavior or performance. Just like a student, the same thing for the adults. And so our findings just confirm, I feel like the obvious of yeah, if we have something that's effective that promotes well-being, we'll see behavior and performance improve as a result.
So definitely, I'll put those links in the show notes. A plethora of resources for educators who want to access those. We've had a great conversation today about your background and how your research and working with schools led you to start Character Strong and implement that, starting with the secondary level. And then how it helps educator resilience and retention as well. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Yeah, we have a core belief at Character Strong. It says it's all about the adults.
Hmm.
And there's like exceptions to that statement, but it is
Yeah.
something like where we have to get the adult piece right to get the student
Yeah.
piece right. And too often, I think we approach the work because the reason why we got an education is for students, but we're
Yeah.
missing the adult piece. And the adult piece is so critical. The adults need low burden, high impact practices, but we got to support them to implement. And if they're
Hmm.
struggling to implement, it's an issue of the lack of supports. We also have to nurture people to help promote resilience and well-being because it's so critical not only for their performance but retain talent in our systems. And too often the adults are running low. And if the adults are running low, it definitely impacts student experience. And so the thing I would leave people with, it's all about the adults to get to outcomes for students.
Hmm. Well, where can people connect with you, find you online, and access Character Strong's resources?
Yeah, I would just say go to characterstrong.com. You can find me if you want to email clay at characterstrong.com. Would love to chat with you. We love to be brain partners. We have all kinds of free resources too to support the work. Part of what we do at Character Strong is give, 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 and then it makes people wonder what we do on the other side. But our goal is to support educators. We say be the guide, not the hero. The educators who are in the trenches doing the work are the heroes. Our goal is to be the guide and provide resources. And if it means that taking advantage of some of our paid products and solutions because it's low burden, high impact, so be it. But we like to give nonetheless.
Hmm. Well, I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure having you on, hearing more about Character Strong and also how educators are the ones that can help implement this, but we need to focus on their well-being first.
Well, thanks for having me.